Hello and welcome back to the Life Fit podcast. I'm your host, Jack O'Halloran, and today I chat with my fellow barefoot enthusiast, Paul Thompson. Paul has been working as a podiatrist for over 10 years, and he has a wealth of knowledge and wisdom on the human foot. As well as being a qualified podiatrist, he is also a certified barefoot trainer, functional movement specialist, a qualified Pilates Matwork Instructor, and trained in dry needling and mobilisation techniques, so you could say he understands a thing or two about human walking patterns, foot posture, and how to help you achieve functional barefoot greatness. In this beautiful conversation, we break down for you a variety of topics such as basic foot anatomy, benefits of functional feet, orthotics, gait patterns, going barefoot versus going shod, improving performance, and much, much more. As always, we also share many tips, tricks, and hacks that you can start implementing and practicing today to help you in your journey to health. You can find out more about Paul and his work at thebarefootmovement.com.au, or you can find him on Instagram at thebarefootpodiatrist. If you enjoy what we do here, we'd be so grateful if you could share our work and reach out. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at LifeFit Studios, or you can catch me on my personal account at jackohalloran_IE. And if you'd like to help us sustain the show, we'd be so grateful if you could become a Patreon. Every little contribution helps, and the more we can receive, the more we can put into being of service to you. We are on Patreon at the Life Fit Podcast. So, without further ado, I welcome you now to sit back, relax, open up that heart of yours, and enjoy the show. Hello, Paul Thompson. How are you? And welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me along, Jack.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Great to have you. You're surviving out there in Sydney, are you?
Yeah, look, it's different times, that's for sure. But yeah, we're getting through it. I think, like everyone, we're just making do with the situation and trying to just get through to the other side, and I'm sure we'll come out stronger.
Yeah, I think we'll have to inundate the pubs and stuff when the doors finally open, but it'll be a worldwide celebration, that's for sure. So Paul, I suppose to begin to introduce you to the audience, you are the Barefoot Podiatrist. Maybe if you'd like to start off by just giving us an iota on your journey, and maybe where you started off and into what you're kind of doing today and what you're into.
Yeah, sure. So I am a podiatrist. I started my podiatry journey like everyone else through uni. And look, for me, even through the uni days, I just had this internal battle with orthotic therapy. So orthotics are the devices we put in people's shoes to help correct dysfunctional foot patterns or gait patterns.
Yeah.
And I don't know, for me, there was this battle. There was this underlying kind of game at uni that people used to see who could prescribe the most orthotics, and for me, it just didn't seem. I don't know. I felt
And there
like
is a lot of money involved with orthotics, isn't there? Like it's an easy thing to want to sell. Do you know?
Yeah, right. It's like it's that magic pill that if you can keep popping them, you can make good money. But look, it's all we knew at the time. It's all we were taught. But every condition kind of led to an orthotic. And for me, I surf. I live near the coast. I don't know. I don't want to be in an orthotic. And I had foot issues. I had a knee reconstruction back in 2009. So throughout my career as a podiatrist, which I've been doing for around 15, 16 years now, for the first 9, 10 years of that, or probably less actually, I was still prescribing orthotics and doing what I was taught to do at uni, but I was constantly on this search for, I guess, trying to unravel the underlying problems. Like I knew why I was putting people in an orthotic and what I was trying to achieve. But then, you'd see those patients again in a year or two and you had to make them new ones because they weren't supportive enough anymore, or another issue had popped up. So you had to tweak the orthotic to try and rectify the new issue. And, you'd get them out of pain. But I was always just, I guess having these moments or battle still internally, just that I wasn't fixing the patient. And I got into podiatry to help people, to help them move better. And that's kind of what I wanted to try and achieve. So then, years later, after I'd been looking at different options and I'd tried and dabbled in a few different variations of going more barefoot, I got into the Nike Free kind of trend. That didn't really work that well for me. And a few other kind of, I guess, trends that popped up along the way. And then I started looking into a lot more functional training courses and reading a lot more about functional movement, functional training, functional anatomy. And it just started to click with me, and I started getting mentored off a lot of people outside my industry. So, physios, chiros, who were doing different things but weren't looking at the feet. So they were using these functional principles throughout the rest of the body. And it started to all gel in my mind that, the foot's similar. We need to start treating that as part of this functional chain. And it just progressed from there through these amazing mentors, through trial and error on myself and patients. Just don't tell the patients that, I was able to really start to figure out a way of trying to reset the feet. And just, I guess I became, I feel like I've become quite good now at assessing how people are moving and the actual dysfunction, like what's stopping them from moving as well as they could. And then now I just try and treat that, which is mainly through things like mobilisation therapy, sometimes some dry needling or soft tissue work. But the big thing I do now is functional training from the ground up. So it's all, exercise based, with the goal that we start correcting these dysfunctional movements or dysfunctional patterns and educating the patient. So that's where I'm at now. And I love it because I feel like I'm getting people moving better. They understand the issue. And that's the thing, right? I still get people now travel from all over the place to come and see me, which is pretty cool, because they want to know what's actually wrong with them.
That's the thing. There's a why behind it. That's the problem with orthotics is they don't address the why. The problem is there in the first place. It's like, here's a plaster to heal your pain for a small while, but it denies an opportunity to really get into the cause. And look, don't get me wrong. I think there is a place just to pick up in the orthotics and maybe hopefully finish it off, because it's I think the less time spent talking about orthotics probably the better. But like the thing is, there is a place for them, but that's usually only in a congenital issue, serious something like that, or something like a temporary fix. So you say to this person, look, for a month, take the orthotics to take the immediate issue away. But the goal has to be to get functional. The goal has to be to get away from the cast or the crutch or whatever. And that's what orthotics can become, is they can become a crutch, be it psychological or metaphorical or whatever.
Yeah, and look, I still prescribe orthotics. Like, I actually still prescribe orthotics. But for me, prescribing an orthotic now, it's either a crutch for someone, but at the start, I'll have that conversation with them, like, here's what I want to achieve for you. Here's your goals, what you've told me. Here's how we can achieve that through exercise or whatever. But right now you need this. It's like if you had a broken arm, it's like you're not going to just go and start doing rehab on that broken arm. You're going to put it in plaster, let it heal and settle, and then rehab it once the plaster comes off. So we'll have that conversation.
Yeah.
But for other people, there might be structural issues or congenital issues, like you said, that no amount of barefoot rehab training is going to fix. Quite often I'll still attempt throwing some exercises in there and seeing how we go. But the conversation with those people are that, look, you're probably going to be in these orthotics for a long time. But hey, there's no harm in getting more functional anyway and relying less on that orthotic. So there is a time and place, but I do believe they're overprescribed and over-relied upon.
Absolutely. And I suppose a good point to pick up, because people listening who mightn't know much about, what's the benefit of being barefoot, I suppose a good place to start is understanding the anatomy of the foot, and asking the questions like, right, in order for either of whatever part of my foot, whether it's the big toe or the ankle or whatever, in order for that to thrive, what do I need to give it? And I think if people begin to ask those questions, it's like, what would my talus joint love in order to be able to thrive. And then if we can come up with the movement patterns and the behaviors, such as kicking the shoes off when you're in your back garden, or the little things like that. But I think people generally, there may not be as much of an awareness as to just how awesome the feet are. Like the complexity of the engineering in the foot and the sensitivity from a neurological perspective. It really, it begs belief. I don't know, maybe if you want to give a little lesson in some of the magic wonders of the foot, it might help people kind of gain an appreciation for it.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the important thing to understand, though, is there's no perfect foot, right? And this is where people will come in saying they've got a low arch or a high arch, or they'll have this preconceived idea about what their foot should look like. There is no perfect foot. It's how it functions, and that's the conversation I'm having with clients. We'll talk about what that dysfunction is. Like, is the big toe not engaging through the movement or whatever? And then look at why, what's stopping that from happening. If anything, it might just be the brain. They might have lost connection with that. So a big part of it's just understanding what they need to be, working on to function better, and just a few basics. So like the foot has, 33 joints, over 100 muscles, tendons, and ligaments. There's around 200,000 nerve endings. Like, it's jam-packed full of goodness. It's designed to support itself, like this structure. And not even support itself. Like, when you look at some of the muscles that attach into the foot, they're coming up from like right up midway through your leg. These are really long muscles that are designed to eccentrically contract to help control pronation, but also then the way those muscles wrap around the leg. When you look at functional anatomy, it might not just be dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, like up and down movements that muscle does. There's a level of rotation to it. Like, a lot of the muscles that enter the foot have a level of rotation to them, which tells us, or tells me, that they're designed to lower that arch with control and then re-engage that arch with control. Like, those muscles aren't there by coincidence, and they're not there with that rotational factor by coincidence. Like, if we just had to lift the foot up and down, the muscles would all be attaching very differently into the foot. And that's where, I feel like things like orthotics don't solve the underlying issue, because all we're doing is just propping the arch up. We're not letting any of those muscles in the foot or further up the leg that control the foot. They don't work if you're just blocking them from doing what they need to do, which then affects things like the hip, the lower back, right up through to the top of your head, really, from conversations I've had with chiropractor friends. So, the foot, like, it needs to be treated with more respect. We train every other part of the body and rehab every part of the body, but yet, like, the foot has...
Forget about the feet, yeah.
Yeah, and there's that many muscles in there. Like, why do we just leave them out? Like, can you imagine just not using your hands, like all those little muscles and bones that are designed to move? And think about, like, 33 joints, like I said. Like, what are joints meant to do? They're meant to move. No one moves their feet and tries to mobilize their feet. Like, we need to look at what's in there, what each of those things are meant to do, because they play a role. Like, we can't just, cut off at the ankle and go, well, you know what, like, I've rehabbed my calves, the foot should take care of itself. Like, it's not going to happen. Like, you get that foot involved in part of these movements, and you'll see, like, the efficiency of your movement will just go to the next level. So if it's performance you're after, you need to train the foot.
Big time.
If it's less pain, less injury, you need to train the foot. Like, the foot has to be part of this equation.
I suppose for someone listening who might say, oh, I've never injured my foot, but I have performance problems. And I suppose the idea is the way we generally treat our feet in society, it's probably a little bit different on the coast in Australia where it's nice and hot and stuff, but we wear big, thick, cushioned shoes with narrow toe boxes, with arch support, raised heels, and we sit on our arse and chairs all day long. So we're turning off that kinetic chain. We're turning off our sensitivity to the foot and all it can do for us, and as well the hip. And that, of course, has an effect. You look at something like, if the big toe can't extend, you're likely not going to be able to dorsiflex your ankle, which means your hip extension is going to be reduced, which means then you'll have less glute initiation, and you'll more than likely
your lower back will have to do more extensor work than, let's say, your hips were doing. And then because of that, you stop using your diaphragm to breathe, and now all of a sudden you have tight traps and tight scalenes and scoms, and it goes all the way down. And that's just from the big toe alone. That's the wonder with the foot. You could pick any particular part of it and just follow the dominoes, and they're there. And I think for people to realize that the way they've behaved, and it's not a criticism, but it's just the way we treat our feet. Very normally, if you're a carpenter or a plumber or a teacher or whatever, we all have this lack of awareness. We wear these foot prisons, as I like to call them. And I suppose again, if we treated it with the sense of, right, if we want get this to be awesome, so we want it to not be stiff, we want it to be mobile, and we want it to be able to control, neuromuscular movements, I think it needs to be really aware of itself, and you get that from kicking off the shoes and playing with your feet and walking out in the grass and feeling the cold and feeling the stones and all of that, which in Ireland most certainly isn't done.
100%. But I think the thing as well, and it's a thing like online, on social media, like I've seen a bit of a trend to barefoot training, which is cool. Like more people are talking about it and getting involved. But what I'm seeing as like from my position, it's great people getting their shoes off and playing with their feet. But the thing that needs to happen is you need to rehab your feet. If you've been in those foot prisons for however many years, then to just like take them off and start trying to, do different training or go for a big walk barefoot if you haven't done that for like however long, like there's a rehab process that needs to happen. Like you need to start small, you need to reactivate the muscles, make sure the joints have enough mobility. Like you just said, the big toe doesn't bend enough because those foot coffins, if you look at the anatomy of the shoe, around the big toe for a traditional like thick cushion shoe, they're going to have a bit of toe ramp at the front, right, where the toe kind of kicks up at the front a bit, curls up. That's because they do that generally because the cushioning is so thick that you can't bend the big toe enough for normal gait. So they add a bit of a toe ramp in there to like help facilitate that roll off the big toe. But if you can't bend your big toe enough in the shoe, then all those things you said before around like less ankle dorsiflexion, less hip extension, all that comes into play. Even if you don't have a big toe issue, the shoe's causing a big toe issue. And the other thing that you didn't mention before with the big toe not bending, if that doesn't bend as well as it should, like I truly believe the big toe is one of the most important joints in the whole body. If that doesn't bend as well as it should, then you're not getting the windlass mechanism activating, which is when essentially the plantar fascia kind of tightens up in the arch and helps to facilitate more structure in the arch for toe off. So that's not happening to its full extent. You're also then forced to compensate around that big toe. So if you can't go over the big toe by bending the big toe and taking your body weight over the top of your big toe, then you have to go around it. Most people will dump their arch in, drop their subtalar joint down to the ground, so essentially get into that pronated flat-footed position, regardless of whether they're flat-footed or not, to get around that big toe and roll off the side of the big toe, which then leads to things like bunions. All the muscles in the feet start to switch off because they're obviously not being taken through their normal, like aligned position or centrated position. So once they're out of their, optimal alignment, they're just not going to work as well or work at the right time. And then once that big toe switches off, the muscles around that, there's a direct link between the big toe and like that whole posterior chain, so hamstrings, glutes, that big toe is not facilitating that sort of propulsion phase of gait, or even during squatting, for instance, then you're not going to get the same activation through your like hamstrings and glutes. So all of a sudden, regardless of the big toe just not being as functional, you've lost stability through your whole body essentially, all because that big toe has changed how you move.
Which is kind of sad for the person who's, let's say, in the gym and they're putting huge work into their glutes or their hamstrings or their back strength or whatever it is, and they're probably not seeing as much progress, or maybe they plateau after a while. And it's like, you can put lovely windows in your house and put a lovely kitchen in it and do all these things. If you don't have the foundation, it's going to crumble in some form, or it's going to get stuck. And that's really like, they're the first point of contact with the ground. They're the first thing that sends information to our brain, there's so much importance to it. And to hone in on that thing you were saying earlier on about, like, it's not just about right off with the shoes and the foot prisons and just be barefoot from now on, because that would just be silly. I mean, that's like going for your first ever swim and it being in the big ocean and no armbands on. It's just, you probably develop a fear of it. Whereas for the person who does I don't know, maybe they run 10K 4 times a week, what I'd say to them, if they were interested in going barefoot, is, look, maybe do, just for this week, do 2 or 3Ks. Do a couple of 2 and 3 and 4Ks, nowhere near your previous level, just to help you build yourself back up. And as you said, then rehab. So you have to mitigate the old punishments. So say if the big toe is stiff, you have to isolate that and loosen it. You want to develop function in the arch. You want to develop torque in the hips. There's loads of areas that can then be specified. But I suppose it's that marriage of the specifications, but also then of the whole system and the whole human as a habitual being. So just getting person, when you come home from work, just kick off the shoes. When you're watching TV, sit on the floor instead of a couch. These little things make a huge difference as well. But yeah, certainly not for people who listen to this. I really hope you don't do it. But it's that, if you are doing 10K on average, don't change your shoes and do another 10K. It's, your body is operating on a completely different input system at that point.
Yeah, and that's like quite often when I get runners come in that like want to take on that more barefoot approach, or get rid of their orthotics or whatever we're trying to change. The shoes, or even ditching the orthotics, they're the last thing that I do, and I tend to err on the side of caution. But I'll have people doing just drills and reactivation exercises for quite some time until they can prove to me that they have a stable foot, that they can have a stable foot on one leg, they have a stable foot through some hopping type motions. So I know that once they're out, in the real world and starting to then use some barefoot or start running barefoot or training barefoot, that I'm confident, they're confident that their foot's like back in the game. We want to know that it's come to the party, it's doing what it's meant to do. And even if it's not perfectly doing what it needs to do, as long as the key players and the key muscles and the joints that need to bend are all doing what they're meant to do, then I'm happy for people to start doing, like you said, if they're doing a 10K run normally, they might start with a 1K run barefoot and then throw their shoes on and do the rest, or whatever it may be, depending on, case by case. But it's definitely starting with the drills. And I put a lot of them on Instagram quite often, just ideas for people to play around with and do things that are in a safer environment.
That's at the Barefoot Podiatrist.
Yeah, that's right. But
get that plug in.
That's right. But it's just, because I'd rather see people do some of these drills to just like, they're the things I do with clients. It's like just different drills and activities and you can pick from them and, see what works for you. Ideally, getting assessed and knowing what specifically needs to happen, tends to work better. But like, there's no harm in starting somewhere. And, there's my account, there's other accounts that have similar things, but it's not just like taking your shoes off isn't going to solve the problem. You need to retrain your body how to move properly, I guess, is the key message I want you to take away.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, it makes sense in any regard. I mean, you should target your weak areas and strengthen them before they come back to bite you in the ass. And it should be no different with feet. If we have consequences of the behaviors of how we've treated our feet, whether we know those consequences are there or not, the sooner we can address them and find solutions for them and move on, the better. So I'd 100% agree. And it's like, yeah, hopefully people do decide and they say, okay, let's go to an actual specialist who can pinpoint for me, that I'm not just asking Dr. Google. But at least for I don't know, for people to begin the journey, just to box clever about it. Like, I mean, it would be, and it's why it's a great idea to aim to build confidence by doing drills, is because when you go for, a run when you're used to Asics or whatever, and then you go barefoot, I mean, that is a different ballgame. And if you're not used to it, your nervous system will freak out. Whether there's damage or not, it'll probably send pain there and you'll be in trouble. So, anything to build confidence is same. You take the elderly population and let's say they have a fear of falling. So you'd isolate that and you'd build confidence on their balance. And then, I suppose it's the same approach there. But hugely important and a huge one to get across, because I've often listened to podcasts or seen cool stuff regarding barefoot or some other new thing, and you think, oh Jesus, great, I better throw my toys out of the pram and go mad for that. But
yeah,
it's just people who are, especially the people who are performing maybe on higher levels, they need to mitigate that change. And it is a change that I do believe is the better.
oh for sure.
Now, whatever about the recent record-breaking shoes, but like there does seem to be much more benefit if we can be barefoot more with a foot that actually works for us, a foot that's functional. I think that's better than any shod possibility could be.
And look, people quite often ask me about shoes with sport or shoes with lifting, and like if you want to wear a shoe or you think a shoe is going to help, break a record, like cool. If that's like an aid, it's like I guess having a I don't even know what, like you need to get. It's like a baseball bat, right? You're gonna hit a ball or a cricket bat or whatever. You still need to learn how to swing first, which is and then the bat might change based on whatever you want to trying to achieve. That's probably not the best analogy, but you want your foot to know how to run and how to engage with your hips and core and everything first. Or lifting, like if you can lift really well barefoot, so you've got the right range of motion, all the muscles are engaging at the right time, you've got a really good grounded feel, and then it comes to competition time and you're like, well, you know what, I can already squat really well, that heel might just give me that little bit of an edge to win this comp, then cool. Like if that's going to get you just that little bit of extra lift for that for that goal of winning that competition, and that works for you, then cool, go for it. But I guarantee you will get stronger by not using the aid every time you train.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like you still need to at some point take that aid away and train your body.
100%.
I guess is the what we need to be looking at doing.
It's even the same in sport. Like you take something like soccer. Like soccer is an 11-a-side game on a big pitch, but in training, it's not all just the 11-a-side game. They might do a fucking 6-on-6 in a small 10-meter pitch or something. So you extrapolate something more difficult, practice that, and then when you go to your performance zone, use your aids, use your tricks and your cheats or whatever you want to call them, and by all means. And I think that's a nice point to bring in, because there seems to be this little bit of an us versus them with the barefoot and the shod community. It's like that, to the point that neither can actually see each other's qualities. And what's in the middle of it all is what's really important, which is people, people and their functional, happy feet and happy lifestyles. And that's you're showing a great, lovely appreciation for both, that there's a need for, the specific designs and specific shoes, or there's needs for technologies like orthotics and different things in certain contexts, and then there's needs for what's natural and what's pure to us. But there definitely, I don't know, have you come across much of it, but there does seem to be that kind of an us versus them, two sides with different flags and they're throwing rocks at each other kind of thing.
Oh mate, I went through, so like I said, I've been doing this for some time now. When I first started speaking out online, I guess, and on social media against orthotics and talking about barefoot and just trying to, I guess, speak, the truth I was experiencing at that time, I copped so much flack off my peers, haters online, throwing rocks because it wasn't the status quo. Some members of my podiatry association had some phone calls that were quite aggressive off some orthotic companies that sell off-the-shelf orthotics to some sporting teams over here. So look, there was definitely an us versus them, and there still is 100%. But I still believe wholeheartedly that everyone can function better barefoot. All right. And take that for what you will. Like, whatever you believe in is fine. I'm not here to try and make you change your beliefs, but I guarantee if you can use your foot and improve the function of your foot, then regardless if you still want to wear a shoe or not, or go to a barefoot shoe, you will have a better like holistic connection to your body. Things are going to work better. You'll have better control over the two things that connect you to the ground. Like, there's only that one little surface where we're standing or walking, running. The bottom of our feet are the one thing that connects us to the ground. And if we're not connected to the ground, like I said, there's over 200,000 nerve endings. And if those nerves aren't telling our brain what's happening and you don't feel stable, like, all our brain wants is for us to feel stable, right?
Yeah.
Like, you watch a child trying to learn to develop, to crawl, walk, roll. You put them on soft mats, it's going to slow them down.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? It's going to take them longer to walk, longer to crawl, because it's unstable and their brain doesn't feel safe. You put them on a harder surface, all of a sudden they can start generating the stability they need to then activate the rest of the chain to get them through those developmental milestones. As adults, we forget that, or we don't feel that as much because we've already learned to stand. We're not trying to learn a new skill, so our body kind of already feels like it can do it. But subconsciously, there's always that level of instability. If you're not connected to the ground properly, your brain feels unstable and it's constantly trying to find new patterns and pathways to keep you as stable as you can. And that's when you'll start compensating. And it can be little things, right? Like, so again, the big toe, if that's not firing properly, what do we generally see? All the little toes starting to claw more. Okay, cool. Clawed toes. Some people, that's horrible. Other people, I can deal with that. But then what's the effect of those clawed toes? Generally, it means your whole calf complex is going to tighten up more because that's working overtime. So all of a sudden you've got these chronic calves that then leads to calf strains or other issues up into the knee. Like, there's a roll-on effect, all because you're not feeling stable because the big toe's turned off. That's just one example. So, regardless of your shoe belief, I truly believe we need to be, learning to integrate barefoot training. And it can be as simple as just using different surfaces. So if you're kind of like, no, I don't want to hurt myself and get my shoes off and go and start training barefoot, then start really small. Start with some different surfaces at home, like a Shakti mat, like an acupressure mat, or a lacrosse ball, or some fake grass or real grass or some carpet, and do some different, like just standing on them could be one thing. Different surfaces to get input into your feet, start feeling your feet again. But then trying to just activate some muscles on different surfaces can really get the brain fired up to the feet again, which can help start feeling that sense of stability. And then, like I said, if you need to wear shoes, like, I don't advise wearing shoes, but there's a level of performance for some people that shoes are really important, and we're not going to break that belief, and that's fine. But I still think having a stable foot first is important. And then fashion. We're never going to get away from fashion and people wanting to wear shoes because they want to fit in, they want to look good, and that's fine. That's part of the society we live in. But again, it's how do we balance that out so we have a stable enough foot, strong enough foot, mobile enough foot, that then wearing those shoes when we want to go out isn't going to, bring us down completely and throw us on this path of compensation and then injury. So yeah, shoes are a necessary evil, unfortunately.
But yeah, and that point of it literally, it can't do any harm to have more functional feet. Much like, we couldn't possibly any worse if we had better hearing or better eyesight or better smell or better knees or hips. But even though all body parts are probably equally as important, but the real trick with the foot is, you mentioned that 200,000 nerves. I mean, that's probably second to the groin in terms of the most innervated part of the body. And maybe what people don't understand is a simple task like standing still, sitting upright, catching a ball or jumping, running, whatever it is. It's like a riddle. From my understanding, the brain takes in all the information it can gather, uses the information it has, and then has to put an output to it. And it's like, if I were to give you a riddle, you'd be silly not to wait till you got all the information.
Yeah.
You know, you'd want as much information as you had before you tried to solve it, and then you'd solve it more efficiently and effectively. And that's what opening the feet, to me, kind of allows us to do. Is that's an extra 200,000 nerve endings that are working for our brain each time it's trying to solve a problem.
Mhm.
And that's happening every single millisecond.
Yeah.
So it's a really kind of important one to hone in. And one I often use for like a physical way of exempling it is, if you balance on one leg, then you can feel your ankle wobble and all of that. And then if you close your eyes, balancing gets much harder. And that's because you've reduced the input going to the brain, so the output becomes less efficient. Which is the same when you wear the foot coffins or the foot prisons, so to speak, or have feet that aren't at their ultimate capacity, or at least that aren't, being trained in well as opposed to badly. So from the neurological perspective, I think probably the lack of appreciation, but also the opportunity, because we've missed it this far as a society, but the opportunity for us to improve physically and even perhaps even spiritually from a grounding sense, because some people will argue that point as well. But to deny that potential that we have, I just think, I don't know, I think it's awful silly, and it'll only be to the detriment of us as opposed to the benefit of us. So the sooner we get unlocking what's there, the better,
Yeah, and look, for people that still want to fit in, there are shoes out there that will accommodate a barefoot lifestyle as well. But like I've been with all this like viruses happening at the moment around the world. I've just been reading a bit more about earthing. I've just had a few of my mentors who are a lot smarter than me have been sending me different articles and things to read. And I've just been reading a couple on earthing and just, the benefits with their immune system and stuff like that as well. And again, without getting too spiritual, like I really believe there is something. It's not my specialty, and I don't claim to know anything about earthing, but like the more I read about it and look into it, like I think it is a major part of that puzzle as well of keeping our body grounded, and keeping our immune system strong, reducing stress. Like there is a whole level of that earthing thing that needs to be, I think, researched more as well and looked into more. But yeah, from the physical structural point of view, like what you were saying, we just need these feet to fire, give feedback, because the one thing all those nerves help to do as well with that input is it can help the muscles output faster and with better timing, right? So when we're just simple act of walking, the muscles need to fire like within milliseconds, at the right time to control pronation, to help with propulsion. Like our foot's going from a mobile adapter as we land, so it's helping us adapt to the surface underneath and absorb force, to then having to become a rigid lever to help us propel forward. So it's an amazing feat of engineering, that it can go from something so mobile to something so rigid, depending on what it needs to be doing, whether it's landing or jumping, essentially. And the timing in that is so precious, because if we miss it by just a little bit, then you're loading joints way more than you should be, or things are out of alignment. So we know what happens then over time. You end up with potentially new knees and hips. So being barefoot and getting those nerves to fire quicker is going to help with that muscle timing as well. So things will fire quicker. And the other thing I find personally, just from like, I'll get down the beach of an afternoon and over rocks and over different surfaces to like barefoot, just to get out and like, especially after work. What I find is, and I've been paying more attention to lately, is if you're on a flat surface, and especially in like a shoe, your movement becomes very kind of linear, right? There's not a whole lot of rotation. The foot tends to stay like in a fairly, especially in a more supportive, rigid type shoe, the foot stays in a fairly like stiff position, and it's always then the same muscles up the leg that like tend to get overused, where when you're in a barefoot state, and especially on uneven surfaces, you start using all the muscles to different levels and different efforts, I guess, based on what position the foot's in. So all of a sudden you start training and using the whole leg, the whole, your core, I find works harder. Just walking, the simple act of walking over an uneven surface. It gives so much more input and so many more muscles come into play, which again, how can that not be a bad thing? I mean, a good thing. We can start using all these muscles that we're not often using throughout the day.
That's the thing. And one thing that allows is the poor muscles that have had to pick up the slack because their buddies haven't been doing the work. It allows them a well-deserved break too. And that's what I've noticed with dealing with pain patients, and whether there's injury present or not, quite often what you're dealing with is an overstimulated, overly pissed off nervous system. It's like you come home, from your long days of work and there's that dirty cup in the sink and you're like, for feck's sake, and that one small thing blows you over the edge. But the problem is all of the excess workload before. But it's, if we get, as you said, the hundreds of little guys in the foot pulling their weight, doing their job, the rest can start to do its job and not have to pull the whole line. And even I've noticed that too personally. I mean, you go barefoot and that idea, you're no longer walking in a straight line. It's like your shoulders are dropping down and back, your diaphragm opens up, which probably comes back slightly, bringing you back to that grounding kind of idea, and this kind of idea in psychology of stand up straight with your shoulders back, because you bear your vulnerability. Being barefoot allows that to happen in a natural biomechanical way, which is kind of interesting, and there's probably a link. I don't claim to have any research on it, but it would be a fascinating area of further discovery, I'm sure.
There is a lot of research with barefoot at the moment. Hey, there's this lady I spoke to a year or so ago from America. This is a psychologist from memory. She did this research on running and how it improves your muscle memory, and your not muscle memory. Sorry, your working. What do you call it? Working memory.
Yeah.
So it's essentially how much your brain, like a computer, right? How much you can process at one time. She found it improves that by being barefoot, and the theory is that because you're constantly essentially assessing the ground and what you're about to step on and where you need to put your foot, it helps us improve that working memory, which is really cool. But for me, I find it also almost meditative. It keeps you in the present, because if you're not watching where you're walking barefoot, you're going to step on something that might hurt. So there's also that side of it as well, which I think is pretty cool.
I was speaking with a guy. He's done barefoot marathons now and everything, and he said he was in his brother's farm or something like that one day, and he was actually wearing shoes this day, and didn't he stand on a nail, went up through his shoe and cut his foot, and he reckoned, no, of course it was only anecdotal, but he reckoned that had he been totally barefoot, he would have conjured around that nail and moved out of the way before it had time to do its damage. But because he was desensitized and numb, so to speak, he paid for it. And to bring my own experience, I mean, I remember, I do it quite often, go for barefoot walks down fields and whatever, but one of the early times I'd done it, it kind of hit me one day was that, God, there's a lot of what we call, the fauna and the flora. There's a lot of plants you'd never take notice of. There's a lot of insects you'd never take notice of. There's a lot around us, even in our 4-foot radius around us. Loads of beauty and wonder and all these crazy things that I wouldn't have noticed had I not been aware with my feet. Because whether I was looking down there, looking for thorns or nails or what, or dog shit maybe. But, it's that sense of being more connected allows us to appreciate more of what we're actually connected to. And there is a lot we're connected to that we don't see. So the more, and I view the feet in that sense, they're like eyes for the body, or they're like ears for the body. They work in that same, they're like a sense more than just a feeler of pain and a feeler of icky things. Because I think people think that they think, oh, feet just feel pain, or they feel tickly, or they feel icky. Whereas they're like, some of those 200,000 nerve endings, they have the same chemical reaction in the brain as do the nerves of the nose. So there's some crazy stuff from the foot. But again, certainly if we're going forward and we're having to deal with chaos, whether that's, I don't know, somebody passing us a ball and the ball is a bit to the left of us and we have to jump and twist and do all of those things, or whether it's, a heavy wind or whatnot. If we can be as strongly grounded so that we don't get blown away as those things come, how can that not be a good thing to aim for? And I think the barefoot is or at least becoming more functional barefoot. It's probably the best place to start. I mean, it is where we start our connection. So from my end, I have huge value in it. But I think it's trying to bring that across now and bring it in more into society. I get a lot of weird looks here a lot of the time, because I might go into a shop or whatever, or go down a main street in town without shoes and socks on, which in Ireland is kind of weird. You get laughed at. I assume in Australia and stuff that's probably much more normal, but I think it's just breaking down these stigmas too.
No, there's still a stigma over here attached to it. Like, my kids don't wear shoes for the most part, unless we're going somewhere where they really need them, and then they're in a barefoot shoe.
Yeah.
Like when my son went to preschool, I had to write a letter to essentially let them know that we'd take full responsibility if anything happened, because they were hell bent on him having to wear shoes, and I was like, well, he doesn't need to. He's only 4 or whatever at the time. And then around the shops, we've had people say to the kids, "Oh, where's your shoes? Didn't mummy and daddy put your shoes on?" And talk down to them as if they're being neglected.
Yeah.
And it's just funny, the stigma attached to it. But I guess I'm lucky in my position. I just normally have a nice debate with them.
Yeah, and it can even be little things. I mean, the cleanliness aspect is a funny one, because people think, oh, being barefoot is dirty, but it's like being inside in a shoe, in a sock, that's a perfect environment for fungus and for bacteria. Being out in the air is exactly what your feet want, And look, you might walk in cow shit, or you might walk in dog shit or whatnot.
Yeah, but you can wash that off, right? And if you saw some of the stuff I see in clinic as a podiatrist, like some of the infections and fungal infections and things that people get because of shoes, it's disgusting.
It's nasty.
When you my kids' feet are always beat up. There's always a Band-Aid here or Band-Aid there, but they are that connected to their feet. We'll be walking through the bush barefoot, and my 6-year-old will be like, "Oh, watch that, stick dad, or watch that thing of ants." And he'll be present in the conversation, and just he's not constantly looking at the ground, but he's just that aware of his environment that it's awesome. And he's only 6, and it's because he doesn't wear. Well, I truly believe it's because he doesn't wear shoes. I look at his posture versus all these other little buddies at little athletics and other sporting events. He still stands up really tall. He still has that really deep diaphragmatic breath. His glutes are ridiculous. They're that round and healthy and just strong. He toes off so well through his big toes, at the widest toe splay, and it's because and his balance, you should say his balance is ridiculous. The things he climbs and stuff, he's just that in tune with his body. And I truly believe it's because he's never really worn shoes except now to school. But he's in barefoot shoes. But as soon as he can take them off, he's got them off. He'll skate barefoot. He'll do whatever he can barefoot most of the time, because he knows it feels better, and he feels like he has more trust of his movement and body with his shoes on. It's funny when you said about the nail before. I've noticed that over the years, the more things I've stepped on that I shouldn't have, it might be a burr on the ground, or it could be something like a nail. The reaction time now of my feet, it's almost like I've touched a hot plate. When you touch something too hot, your brain just pulls your hand away that quick. That happens with my feet now. As soon as my foot feels something that's oh, that shouldn't be there, like a bit of Lego, for instance. Normally that'd bring you down for weeks, right? You stand on a bit of Lego as a parent, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
I'm like a Lego ninja now. I hit a bit of Lego and I can react that quick and get my pressure off it, that it doesn't bring me down. It's cool.
That's a good one to hit on, because I've noticed as well, as maybe a year ago or maybe less, had I went out and walked in gravel, it may have been a bit uncomfortable, or at least I'd walk with trepidation. Now we can pretty much run in gravel. Do you know? No, whether that's, I mean, the gravel hasn't fucking changed. You know, all that's changed is my feet have toughened up to it. And people need to realize that, you know, whatever you practice or spend time at, you get better at it. And if you spend time practicing with your 100 muscles and all of your arches and your wonderful toes and joints, they'll get better. And it's, you know, what can be the harm in that? And it's so easy. We don't need to overthink it. We don't need to book, you know, hours of personal training for feet or things like that. It's even simple things, as we said, like kicking the shoes off, just experiencing barefoot, like getting your hands on your feet, getting the ball, you know, massaging them out, doing different things, increasing the relationship with it, you know. And you know, at the end of the day, we're working with a higher potential then, and if we have a higher potential, we tend to do better with ourselves, you know.
100%.
So I'm conscious you have an appointment coming up.
I do. I think just to sort of finish off, I'd like to just like point out that, you know, for people who like don't have pain or injury yet and kind of like don't see that as an issue, or for people who do have pain and injury, especially those like pains, you know, the niggly nagging ones like your plantar fasciitis, your forefoot pain, your Achilles type issues, you know, even just those chronic sort of lower back pains, all those kind of ones that just didn't really have like an injury attached to it. Like if you sprain your ankle, like you sprained your ankle, that's kind of, you know, we know something happened, you need to heal it up and then rehab it. But these kind of funny ones that we're seeing more and more of, like plantar fasciitis, for instance, like there is that many people getting it and that, you know, had perfectly fine feet before. Like when I assess them, the big thing I'm seeing is they're not moving well, right? And then it's the pain that they kind of like paying to see you for, because it obviously hurts and it's stopping them doing what they want to do. So even if you don't have pain, again, like just getting more functional can help you not get these nagging injuries, because as much as we need to treat the symptoms, most of the work I'm doing with those like plantar fasciitis cases, Achilles issues, you know, all those nagging things is correcting their biomechanics.
Yeah.
Right. So it's looking at how they're moving, trying to get them to move in a more aligned state. And what happens? Oh, pain goes away. That's funny. Like we've rested that plantar fascia again. We've taken the load off it because the other muscles have kicked in and helped. All of a sudden, oh, forgot to tell you, I had that, you know, I came because of my foot pain, but I've always had this nagging little bit of lower back pain. That's gone away since I've done that. Or when I used to walk upstairs, like my knees had always hurt. Oh, that seems to have gone because now my foot and my hip are talking again. Like we start seeing all these really cool changes when we just start putting things back in alignment and getting people to just move naturally. So regardless of whether you have pain or don't, like really start looking at your biomechanics. And it doesn't mean you have to go and get a full assessment or anything. Like just start paying attention to how you move. You know, are you keeping joints? There's lots of stuff on the internet. You can start just trying to, I mean, obviously an assessment is ideal. You'll get better professional care and help. But if you're not sure of that or you don't think it's for you, just start looking at different things, you know, like what range of motion should your big toe have? What's a flat foot look like? I don't know, whatever. And just start looking at, well, how functional am I, you know? Because I think you'll find if you're in that kind of modern world of sitting all day, wearing shoes, you're going to have dysfunctional patterns that more than likely will eventually catch up with you. So why not try and get preventative, you know, because prevention's way easier, honestly. Like if you start just making little changes now, it's way easier and way cheaper than trying to treat like an issue once it happens. It's a lot harder to do once it becomes pain.
And as you say, look, even if they had to start small, the point is really just start, you know, start the journey, regardless of how, you know, if you go to the best specialist in the world first, or if you just go onto YouTube. My encouragement is just begin the journey, begin the relationship with the feet again, and I think you'll be all the better for it. Now, just to close off, maybe if you would like to reference your website and stuff, because I know there's a bunch of courses on there that people could look into, given that everyone has loads of time now on their hands with quarantine. And then any other kind of work you have going on, any other, you probably don't have events and the likes, but yeah, so whatever you want to kind of plug and get out there.
Yeah, so my website's like www.thebarefootmovement.com.au. Yeah, I tend to just put a few of the blogs and podcasts and things on there that I've done. I do have a podcast as well that just talks about different foot-related issues and tips and tricks. That's called the Barefoot Movement. Otherwise, Instagram and Facebook is where I tend to put a lot of exercises and ideas for people to just play around with. And that's the Barefoot Podiatrist. And I don't tend to do a lot of online courses as such. I like to try and connect with people. So I'm in the process of putting together some more webinar style ones at the moment, and training ones that are essentially live, but just online rather than a forever green one. But that means we can,
Brilliant,
interact more and connect and make sure you really get the content and take away as much as you can. So there should be more of those dropping again soon, especially given our current situation.
awesome. Well, from the bottom of my heart, and I'm sure the audience, thank you so much for coming on. We had a great chat. I really hope people gain something from it. I'm sure they will. And thanks again. And I shall hopefully talk to you in the future. You might introduce me to some of these master teachers of yours, and I might get to learn some of their wisdoms as well. So all the best, and thanks again, Paul.
No worries. Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
So that's all for today, folks. I hope, like me, you enjoyed your time with Paul. It was a really amazing conversation where I certainly learned loads, and I hope you did too. And I hope it helps you well on your journey to health. If you'd like to book your very own foot function assessment and treatment plan, head on over to lifefitstudios.ie and click on the Book Appointment tab. There you will find a service called the Foot Function Service. In these sessions, I give you a clear understanding of your own foot function, as well as a clear roadmap how to improve your feet for you to be happier, healthier and stronger. If you'd like to find out more about Paul, hit him up on his website, that's thebarefootmovement.com.au, or find him on Instagram at the Barefoot Podiatrist. If you'd like to help support us, we're on Instagram and Facebook at LifeFit Studios, or you can hit me up on my personal page at JackO'Halloran_IE. And if you'd like to help continue to let us serve you, we'd be so grateful if you could support us over on patreon.com at the LifeFit Podcast and become a patron. So until next time, I wish you to stay safe, mind your fellow human, and go with love. Yours in health, Jack.